Welcome to More Action, the podcast for entrepreneurs, business owners, and professionals. I'm your host, Shelly Bryan, and together we have candid conversations with industry leaders to uncover valuable wisdom and lessons learned. My hope is you use these lessons to intentionally take more action in business and life. I hope you share and enjoy. All right, well, I am excited for today's guest here on the More Action Pod. This one she did just that, okay? She took more action, and I love that we connected. I think it was on LinkedIn originally, and just was able to go back and forth, and she took a lot of action. And so when people do that, they get my attention. And I think this conversation is going to go a few different ways, so you're definitely going to want to stay all the way through. But Lauren Furtado this is the best, self-proclaimed, not your typical CPA. I'm sold already, right? Because you know that we do unconventional things, is that the quickest way to frustrate me is to say that's the way we've always done it. And so when someone claims to be non-typical, you get my attention immediately. But she spent 19 years in public accounting, serving multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 companies. I know that we're going to have some fun kind of like corporate conversations here into entrepreneurship and then all of the above. And one thing that I love is that she has a focus on blue-collar companies. So being in the AEC, so architecture, engineering, and construction industry ourselves with our construction company, I am so excited to welcome Lauren to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
It's going to be a great conversation, but I would love for you to give. So I gave kind of a little background, but share a little bit about, you were working for billion-dollar organizations. A lot of people are like, wow, that's great to have on your resume. Why would you ever leave that? Why would you ever leave that, Lauren?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because you talk to accountants, they're like, I can't believe you stayed that long. Yeah, I took a very traditional route into accounting. I liked numbers in college and was encouraged to try an accounting class, and I got the job with a big four firm, and I was doing all the things. It's a very kind of up or out environment. We've got a lot of employees, so it's very competitive, and that was an environment I thrived in. I wanted to outperform everybody else. Give me all the things. I'll work whatever hours that means. And I saw a ton of stuff. And that's what kept me there for 19 years, was working on different companies, seeing the ins and outs, right? We spend a lot of time in public accounting in business processes. So we are digging into, how do you do all of your transactions in the system? What's the customer journey? Talk to me about financial reporting. I mean, we get into the nitty gritty. So learning and seeing these companies, how they operate, and then getting into the numbers, reviewing their financials, understanding what those metrics look like. I mean, I've seen tons of mergers and acquisitions, spins, companies going public. I mean, never a dull moment in the markets, that's for sure. So it kept me there for as long as I was, and a lot of great benefits. I never regret a minute of being in that environment. But after, let's see, 15 of that years, I went through a very personal experience of losing my husband. And at that point, after kind of the repercussions of that trauma, our life was completely flipped upside down. So it was now an evaluation of what I wanted my life to look like. All of our plans went with that grief. It was everything that we were planning to do as a family and how to build our finances, and all of those things were out the door. So for me, it was an evaluation of, well, what do I want my career to look like? Is this it? And I really was craving impact. That was the big missing piece. And sure, I learned a ton serving these big corporations, but when you are one of many, right, it can feel a little less fulfilling. So I did a reflection of, how can I bring my expertise and all of these things that I've seen over the years and help people who truly have skin in the game, right? Instead of looking at my job as a way to just contribute to my family, how can I help other families? How can I, foster an environment of even trickle down impact, right? Because nothing fulfills me more of helping someone in their business with the finances so they're able to hire more employees, create more benefits for more people, and take more money home for their families, right? So that for me was the driving factor for me starting my firm.
So, you know, I mean, there's so much there. There is so much there. But I actually want to just pause for a moment because everybody that's tuning in, you may or may not have heard here on the show. I think this episode is going to be in the 160s. I had a traumatic event happen that changed my life too. And I could only imagine as a family losing your husband. And I'd love for you to just share, if you're willing, a little bit about how that experience, that thing that happened, like how it has changed the way you've touched on it, but how it has changed the way that you make decisions going forward. Because here's the thing is that both Lauren and I had big things happen. But I think that sometimes if we can talk and share these big things, that other people may not need to have the big thing happen to be able to learn how to make different decisions for themselves and their career.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's when you have something sudden and traumatic and completely life altering, you can go one of two routes. You can start to behave in a way that is very fear-based, right? And I think you need to figure out if you want to go that path or you want to make the most of every minute that you have. Unexpected things can happen every single day. So how do I want to spend the time that I am blessed to have here? And to be honest, leaning on my faith was such a big part of my story. So I would be remiss if I don't mention that. And leaning on my faith and knowing that I can trust God with what my life has in store gave me a fearlessness, the complete opposite of where you could go after a traumatic experience, and saying, you know what, I'm going to have faith. I'm going to try the things. I'm going to be bold. Doesn't mean you need to be careless and risk taking. Like you're not going to find me skydiving maybe with two young children at home. But at the same time, right, I'm going to take the steps to make the most out of what I am called to do. And it's not the life that I was living before. It's unfortunate that it did take the traumatic experience for me to realize that, because I agree with you. People can be empowered and take the bold steps in order to create the life that they want without having to go through a really life-changing loss.
I thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that is something that is so powerful. And one thing I heard recently, actually in my Bible study, all business women in this Bible study group, is one shared the difference between faith and hope is action. And so it was just like, obviously the show is called More Action. When she said that, I was like, oh my gosh, like it is that faith that you had, that you leaned on, that let you take the action towards creating the life and really focusing on every single minute. Like we all have this, I don't want to say the same amount of time, but we have the same amount of time in each day. And how we use it is up to us. And so I just thank you so much for sharing that. What a testimony that you have for what you're building now that we are going to talk about.
Yes.
And being able to make that transition too, because I can tell you, and I have shared this before, right? The golden handcuffs, all the benefits that come with being in a job, it is hard to let go, super hard to let go of those. Was there a moment that you were okay, the benefits, I can let it go. I could build this, I could do that. Where you took, like you kept moving forward, but you still had that fear a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the very beginning of when my husband passed, I needed consistency. I needed a little bit of the bare minimum of like making sure I can pay my mortgage and not lose my job, because we were in deep grief, right? Candidly, I needed a little bit of grace before I got to this point. It wasn't a pretty situation, right? It wasn't that like my husband died the next day, I started my business, right? Like there was a time period where things were very griefy. And I still am parenting grieving children. Even 3 years later, there's things that are triggers, and we talk a lot about it. But I think for me, the realization that in a corporate job, that feeling of safety is very perceived. It's not real. This like comfortability that everybody gets into of like this big job and I got these benefits. Guess what? if they get hit financially, they are not going to hesitate to lay people off. So just again, that realization that I was a little bit disposable of a resource that like I can be replaced here. And like, not that I need to be the shining star of everyone's business, but at the same time, it was okay, well, again, like if this isn't truly comfort, this isn't truly security, like what do I want it to look like? And building something myself feels so different, right? The failures feel different. The learning feels so exciting. I know this may sound corny to some people, but like learning new skills in entrepreneurship has been so fulfilling for me.
hmm I love that. I love that it was a perspective shift for you. Is that we can all feel like, oh yeah, it's safe, right? I have this like safe job and it provides this 401k. And when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I had a free car, like all these wonderful things. And then one day you're like, wait a minute, like they're running a business too. It's not personal. It's not personal. It's just that they have to make business decisions. And sometimes those business decisions mean they let go of people. And so you took it and created your own business. And I love how you talked about entrepreneurship and building it. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit because you are working with other, I would imagine, small businesses, blue collar businesses in helping them probably be able to build up. So not only did you have your experience working, in kind of the corporate setting, but then now on your own, how has that perspective change been able to help you with your clients?
Yeah, so I think it's being able to bring them a bit of resilience, right? So I think between my story and like seeing these big companies as well, like, listen, there's always going to be an answer or a solution or an idea that can get us out of our current state. Because when we talk finances, I think a lot of people either feel stuck or they don't understand the numbers. That helping them to understand these financial concepts that sometimes can feel very complicated, especially in most cases in the construction industry or other blue collar service-based businesses, these business owners came up through the trades. Most of them are not finance people or entrepreneurs by experience. They were maybe in the union or they were, a carpenter or whatever for their dad's business and now they're owners, right? So I think just being able to bring the financial concepts to these guys and help them build up, make better decisions using the financial data, it just instills a level of confidence in them that like I love to see that transformation when the light goes on of like, oh, I get it. Okay, now I understand why you're telling me to do that, right? Part of being the not the stereotypical CPA is like providing service that feels warm, right? That, hey guys, like I get it. You don't want to admit that you don't understand your numbers, but like here we are. It's fine. Let's talk about it. I'll explain it. And you can only change your habits if you're willing to look at where you've been.
Oh, that was a good one. I love that. I love that because the thing is that to be able to make decisions right in the future, it comes to anything in your life. Like numbers don't define you. They just give you data to make decisions. And I think that I know that like at various points in various businesses in life, right? Is that I've been like, oh, I'm not going to look at that. Like we'll deal with that later.
Mhm.
But the later never happens. And it's finding like someone that you can partner with. I always talk about like creating like teams around different areas, like in your health, having a team, in your business, having a team, just like in your faith, having a team that you
Absolutely.
can lean on that are experts to be able to get you to that next level and help you like interpret and understand numbers. Because I'm first off the bat, like finances was definitely not my forte, but forcefully through lots of trial and error it had to be, and it just is like it's just data. It doesn't prove whether we're good or bad. You got to remove those labels. Do you see a lot of that where there's like a lot of personal attachment but then the transition over to just data?
Yeah, and it's funny as you were talking, all I was envisioning was like the reluctance of getting on a scale, right? Of like if you're not willing to actually face what the number is on the scale during a weight loss journey, you're never going to be able to get to a goal, right? So it's the same thing in finance. Like we have to look at the snapshot, and I understand, right? Under that scale number, under your financial metrics are decisions, right?
Mhm.
And you may not be proud of all of them, right? Even if I said personally, Shelly, hey, let me see your credit card statement right now. You'd be like, you're going to see that I ordered Uber Eats twice last week and didn't cook my family. You're going to see that I bought myself a handbag. And like, there's maybe things that you feel a little embarrassed to show people. But at the same time, if you are not willing to face the decisions you've made, we cannot make any changes on a go forward. So it's just letting go of that ego, letting go of the perception that someone's judging it. Like, especially when you're engaging a professional at the CFO level, like we want to talk strategy. We want to talk growth. It doesn't matter where we've been. Let's figure out how to get where we're going.
Yeah.
So it is what it is at this point. And it's, again, letting go of that mindset. And until you're in that position, you're probably not going to work that well with someone that you're willing to engage in your numbers if you're not going to show anybody, right? That like, if you're in charge of looking at the statements and the bookkeeping and all the things, like we're going to have a really hard time working together if you're not willing to kind of, unveil that financial nakedness.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that what I was thinking of when you were saying that was like when you go get blood work, right? When you go get blood work and you go, what if the doctor never showed you the numbers? They were like, great, thanks. Okay, bye. Like they had to share the numbers with you. They have to educate you about what these numbers mean and potential changes in your health to be able to move forward.
Absolutely, right? To get you to the right ranges for your age, for your industry, right? It's the same conversation.
For sure. Okay, so speaking of, decisions, it's funny. I was recently on another show and they asked me this question. It's a show for the AEC industry, and they asked me, they're like, "Okay, Shelly, chicken or egg question. Do you focus on cash flow or do you hire first? Like, what do you think?" And so I would love to hear your perspective on that, because I think this is a question that we all face, whether you have a digital company, whether you are in, a blue collar, no matter what industry you're in, do you hire first or do you focus on cash flow? What
Yeah.
are your thoughts?
So if you are even just operating your business on your own, you need to be focused on cash flow, point blank. Like you cannot operate a business, and to be honest, even your personal life, if you don't have some level of cash flow forecasting that you're doing to understand the ins and outflows, the timing as to when cash comes in and cash goes out to make decisions. The only way that I can figure out who to hire, when to hire, how much to pay them is if I look at my cash flows. So absolutely, without a doubt, cash flows is the answer. You may have answered a different way, but at the same time, like even our cash flow forecast that we use, there's a tab that's for headcount. And we plug in like, okay, you want to hire an operations manager or a salesperson. How much are we going to pay them? When are we going to do it? And it flows right into the template to say, here's the impact on your cash balance, right? Can we make it work? Does it make sense? Are we W-2, 1099? Is it full-time contractor? Like we figure out what makes the most sense to your overall business, because it's not just hiring, it's every other decision. Is it, inventory buys of materials? Is it even just looking at the metrics of in construction, like taking a job on, right? Do the numbers make sense? Is, based on your overhead costs and like, again, when the ins and outflows go, does it make sense to take on these jobs that you're bidding for? And like, are we profitable, right? So all of that stuff flows into cash flows. That's like the number one thing that we spend time on as a fractional CFO when we're providing services.
No, I answered the same way. I was like, it was funny because when the question was posed to me, I was like, is this really like I was like, is this really a question? I was like, cash flow. I was like, 100%, it's got to be cash flow.
Yeah.
That being said, before like this was, I mean, and you got to think about it, right? Sometimes like when I had a restaurant, I had to have the people to run the restaurant and I didn't necessarily have the cash flow at the time. And so it's like understanding the projections and being able to lean down that labor load to get the cash flow going. So sometimes I feel like it can go off teeter, but I'm telling you, like I 100% wholeheartedly agree in cash flow. And maybe you could even share an example, because I think that this question is obviously pretty hot and it sounds like you might get it from time to time. If you could share an example, obviously no names, but just how focusing on cash flow allowed maybe someone to build their business or hire the team.
Yeah, so just had this exact conversation with a client this morning. So it is a scenario where a big job is coming. We need resources to fulfill, right? And cash will not come in the door till at least 45 days after we start.
Mhm.
So how do we do that? How do we make sure that we're paying guys, we're providing benefits that can execute the work? And to be honest, we don't have enough cash reserves. That's okay, right? So what are the mechanisms now that we can look into to be able to still say yes to the job? And be able to provide the service in a quality way and make sure nobody's benefits are going to go unpaid. The answer for us in this scenario is we're exploring a line of credit, right? So it's understanding that like it's not just, oh, I don't have the cash in the bank, I have to say no, right? There might be other mechanisms to be able to execute, make a lot of money over the next 2 years on a big job and like execute some really great work, continue to build your reputation, continue to build relationships, right? All of those intangible things that come along with it as well. And understanding it's not just a black and white answer. And until you're willing to look at your cash flows and explore how do we make this work, then you're never going to be able to do it.
I just love that. And I don't know if everyone listening in caught that, but it was like, how are we going to do it? And like, what other options are there? It's not like always an end all be all. And that's one thing that I think is quite interesting when it comes to specifically like financials. What a great example that you just shared is because like you look at it and like black and white, the data is telling you no, we don't have enough cash flow. But then when you get partnered with the right person, it's like, but how can we? That's actually like one of our core values as a company is how can we? There is always solutions. And so being able to explore those. Now, one thing I'd love for you to talk about, because I know that you have experience building companies up to either sell and or go public. And, you know, someone that gosh, it was at an event over a year ago. I'm not going to name drop, but it was interesting. We were talking about the business and she was like, well, are you building it to run or are you building it to sell? And immediately, like it kind of stopped me in my tracks because we weren't thinking there yet. But
Sure.
after I spent some time, I was like, it doesn't matter. Like my answer was, it doesn't matter. We're building it to sell. Like what we do with it doesn't matter. We're always building it to sell. And I'd love to kind of get obviously your expertise on that and then maybe some tips on what it looks like to build to sell.
Yeah, and I think it's having that mindset of like it's really unfortunate when you look at some of the statistics of how many businesses just go out, right? That like when you don't have whether it's generational people to pass it to or you haven't built it in the right way to be able to sell it, it's really unfortunate that years of hard work, yes, it's maybe provided for your family the last 25 years, but that you're walking away from it without being able to sell that and continue to serve whoever you were serving from a customer base. So my heart is like genuinely in like wanting to make sure people have that mindset. But I love that you said it shouldn't really matter either way, which way you actually go. You should probably treat your business this way, regardless, right? That you should be building it in a way that's most efficient. Because one of the big things we talk about in building the value of your business is about processes and systems, right? It's the ability, if you think about, to hand it over to somebody else with minimal work, right? So to the extent you're investing in both people and IT functions, those are like one of the two big areas. Let's look at how you guys are operating your payables process. When you bring in a new vendor, what's the bidding like, right? Again, if we can systematize as much as we can, and again, make sure you've got your people trained up and you're, not the one responsible, that's a really good position to be in. So one of the big things we focus on is, again, creating value through efficiency and making sure processes are buttoned up.
Which is really an interesting perspective from a CPA, right?
Mhm.
So you think like, oh, CPA just looking at numbers, CFO just looking at numbers, but it's so much more than that as far as being able to build the systems and processes. I love that you said that. And one thing that Chris and I always keep in mind, and this transition has really been happening this year, is I was like, how quickly can we fire ourselves from that job? Like, how quickly can we fire ourselves from that? And it's like replacing delegating systems and or people is like, how quickly can we fire ourselves and making the brand stand on its own rather than be a reflection of who the people are that started it.
Yeah, absolutely. And candidly, I have that issue in my business where like I'm the face, right? So it's making sure I've got CFOs that are involved in building the brand as well. Because it just, creates more dependency on you. And when you're trying to exit, it's going to be a problem. I think also with the personal experiences we've been through, I don't know if you agree, but like, listen, bad stuff happens all the time. That like, what happens to my children if like I have nothing to show for it for them to be able to sell it, right? So it's having that mindset from the beginning of like, you never know. So it's just making sure you're cognizant of that. And to be honest, we're not talking about like huge changes that need to be made. It's simple things you can be doing, right? That like documenting processes as you go and using, again, as much IT functionality as you can to be able to help you do that with, not as many man hours.
Which I mean, for us, one thing, just leaving this for everyone tuning in right now, is because like you hear SOPs, right? And it's like, okay, oh my gosh, you want me to write down my process in which I do everything? Like, I don't have time for that, Lauren, right? Like I've said that, like, oh, and I've actually I have an incredible team of virtual talent that actually creates the SOPs for us.
Love
So
it.
there are ways that you can do this where it doesn't all fall on you and it doesn't cost a lot of time and or money to be able to get it done. But I always think about like playbooks. I'm always like, we need a playbook for our superintendent. We need a playbook for our PM. We need a playbook for our marketing. I'm like, what that looks like. So anytime I'm like, I want to know that if I'm sick or if something's happening, that the business moves on. I just don't want
Absolutely.
it to be a delay from me because I didn't take the steps to give someone else a playbook to take action when I'm not there.
Absolutely, right? And think about it. Like you want to have the ability to go on vacation with your family. Like at the end of the day, right? You want to make sure that the house isn't burning down while you guys aren't in it. So it's making sure that you've got the right resources plugged into everything. The other thing too, as you were talking, I was just thinking is, and this is a lot of kind of some of that corporate experience coming over when you work for big companies. The only way to evaluate performance too for your folks is if you've got a benchmark, right? And if you've got some level of hey, I set these expectations. They're in writing. Everybody else at your level's doing the things, right? To have some of the hard conversations with people, like you've got to set expectations up front in a detailed way so they understand how to execute their job.
Oh, 100% agree. 100%. And it's a CYA for you as a business owner. So I think that's really important. Now, the other thing that you had mentioned was like setting up like bad things happen all the time, right? And setting up, I swear, 2 years ago, I don't know why, it just fell on my heart. I do know why, but like it just fell on my heart to mitigate risk. I just looked at everything in my life. And when I say my life, I think the family, right? And I'm like, so Chris and I run the business. This is what provides for us. And we're growing at an exponential rate. I'm looking over here in my office because I literally took up, the big Post-it paper and put it on the wall by our whiteboard. And I literally took Post-its and I was like, where do we have risk? And I looked at health insurance, life insurance, like review, setting up a trust, like all these different things. And I just literally put all these different, like, I don't want to say risk is like a bad thing, but I was like, we're going to always have risk. You're a business owner. It just is what it is. But how can we mitigate risk? That's why I always looked at, and I was like, I went through it all. And literally over the last 2 years, I've been able to like pull down each one of those things because I'm like, I want to make sure that the kids are protected. I want to make sure that we are protected, right? There's all kinds of crazy stuff, crazy people out there, all kinds of things. How do you, because we hired an estate attorney to be able to help us through this process, but I know that obviously CPAs, attorneys work hand in hand. What is some advice that you would provide to a fellow business owner like us who has families and wants to not only protect the business, the employees, but their families?
Yeah. So I would, at the end of the day, I would point them to a financial advisor. I personally use one as well who helped me with all those things as well. But where I fit into that picture is when we're talking about the goals of your business, right? We're talking about the finances of your business. We're going to pull back the layers and we're going to find out the why, right? Because you could tell me, oh, Lauren, I want to grow, double my business next year. all right, Shelley, let's talk about why. Start to uncover some of the goals you have for your family. And if that's creating some contingency for them, or, your son's going to a private school, or your daughter needs a car next year, whatever those kind of personal things are, and maybe it's not risk things per se, but it's goals for your family. And those tie in very closely to where you want your business to go, because that's going to drive how much you're pulling out, right? And we got to make sure you can keep the business afloat and that you're pulling out what you want to reinvest in the business versus what you guys need to provide for your family.
Yeah, no, I just think it's really important. It's asking these questions, right? These are the things that it's like setting up an operating agreement with a partner, right? Nobody
Yep.
wants to have that conversation because it sucks because you have to have like all the like, what if we argue? What if we disagree? What if one of us wants to like these are tough conversations that we don't want to have, but those are the very conversations that we need to have to be able to uncover not number one, our goals are aligned. Are we preparing for it? Are we protected? And I think the more that we could kind of like talk about that and have those conversations and know that you're not alone, right? These are common things that you're probably thinking about, but haven't taken any action on. There are so many people that you can partner with, just like Lauren, to kind of bring out those questions in you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, again, understanding how some of it all fits together in your business, that people don't always think about, right? They almost think of it a little separately. And it's really marrying the two together so we can be grounded when we provide our service in the goals. At the end of the day, when we're talking cash flows and we're talking decision making, it's like, all right, let's ground ourselves back in the goals. And it's even just like part of our dashboards. We go to it every month and say, how is this moving us towards the goal?
I love that. I love that. And it's just using the data. I just got to come back really quick to how and I've talked about this before. A scale doesn't define you, like a weight scale. It doesn't define you. But if you don't get on, you don't track your weight, you don't track what you're, eating. And I don't mean like track, like you can't eat anything. Like you have to look and be able to reflect on stuff to see if you are moving in the right direction or the wrong direction. It doesn't define you. It just is what it is. And I think it's important to remember those numbers. So, okay, I would love for you to share a little bit about finding the right CPA or CFO. And even actually, let's step back for a second because I know that there are people here. This is a relatively new term only in that it's got more visibility, but fractional.
Yep.
So, because businesses hiring on a full-time CFO could look very costly to cash flow, let's call it, and fractional. Could you explain the difference? And then I would also love for you to share like why or where one makes sense versus the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe let's take a step back before we even get to CFOs. I just want to talk about accountants in general because I think people often just say, I need a CPA. I think the perception of what that is typically means I need someone to help me with tax work.
100%.
It's not necessarily the answer. I always use the analogy of a medical degree. The CPA license means that you can use that license to do a lot of different things. Now, I'm not going to go to the dermatologist when I break my ankle, right? So you have to go to the right CPA who specializes in the need that you have. So identifying what your need is and finding the person who has the experience and offers the services to actually fit that need is what you need to do. And there's a few that typically, if I said, okay, you're, a multi-million dollar business, if you had to build just like your accounting team, you need someone doing bookkeeping. So you got to make sure, like you said, someone who actually can tell you what that number is on the scale, right? Making sure the transactions, the journal entries, all of that stuff is being closed out every month, not every year. When you do your taxes, there's no way for you to make change if you're not doing it regularly. The bookkeeper's number one. Tax, obviously, is a necessary evil. We all have to pay them. So it's making sure you've got the right tax expert in there as well. You can find firms that do everything. I personally prefer more boutique of like, hey, we focus on these things specifically. But like with our service, again, we focus just on CFO work. And we partner with the accounting folks. So like we oversee and answer questions that the bookkeepers might have. I just had a conversation this morning about taxes for the year for a client. So understanding what that's going to look like and like, asking questions back and forth. So we're integrated into the process, but you need to make sure you've got those needs met. With the CFO, like you mentioned, very costly to hire this person. They are C-suite executive. They are the chief financial officer, right? Think of yourself as the CEO and president. It is someone who is working right alongside you. So that cost in the market is fairly significant. So a fractional CFO is someone who comes in part-time, right, to provide those services to you. Again, the frequency may differ depending on the size of your company. I always say everyone can benefit from a fractional CFO, but depending on how big you are is how often you need to engage them. So someone early on, maybe you do a once a year consult with a fractional CFO and say, hey, can you help me? I'm trying to figure out like these areas of focus I'm really struggling with pricing or building out a cash flow or, just looking for advice, and they can go and act because they don't candidly have the cash flow to pay a CFO, right? Whereas as you continue to grow, a few things happen. One, obviously you've got more cash flow, but also you can become more complicated, right? The bigger you get, the more people you're managing, the more things you're taking on. Maybe you've diversified your revenue streams, right? So you just get more complex and you're going to need more help understanding the data, making the decisions, getting advice. So really it is engaging someone at that point. I like to say the sweet spot for regular monthly fractional CFO services is between like the $2 million and like $50 million mark from a revenue standpoint. Once you get kind of outside those lines, maybe you only need quarterly before that. And then once you get big enough, you're going to need somebody full time that's like actually executing daily financial decisions with you and your team.
Yeah. And they're the one managing the team, right? The whole
Yeah.
like any bookkeepers or anybody else. So that would be, when I said earlier, like firing yourself from different roles, like that would be it.
Yeah. And what I love about the fractional role for like on behalf of the business owner is that you get a level of expertise that you wouldn't normally, because to be honest, to hire someone really high quality as a CFO in your business is going to cost a lot of money. So to get somebody who's got such vast expertise and also serving other clients at the same time, potentially in the same industry too, there's learnings that happen, right? Okay, Shelly, you're doing this in your construction business. Now I have another client I can maybe say, hey, I've seen it work well. Why don't you guys think about this, right? So without naming names, being able to knowledge share among clients is like such a big value add.
Well, it's just a completely different perspective, right? When you think about, I know we've like referenced doctors so much, but like doctors or even you have to get CE credits every year, right? Continuing education credits to keep your license going. And excuse me, maybe you attend like a program or an event or do an online training or whatever. But I love the little perspective is like you still have to do that, but you have different fractional CFOs have different clients. So they're like having, essentially when you see like the big events and the big meetings and like all the CFOs or CPAs come together, it's like you're doing that all the time. So the knowledge sharing is not only happening like it's just happening at such a rapid rate versus like a typical person that would be internal. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
think, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love what you said about, I think on a go forward, the use of fractional CFOs is going to become so much more common that I think it's starting to catch on of like the benefit that they truly can provide to your business and bringing in the expertise you don't have. It's being able to delegate that responsibility and bring in people who know what they're doing. I think it's just going to start to really take off.
I totally agree. I know a couple actually other believe it or not, fractional CFOs. And it's just like such a great thing that I love. In the beginning, you were like, I've always loved numbers, right? And so being able to take that love of numbers and not only have a great career, but then now create a great business it's just like great timing, Lauren. Like doesn't happen this often when that happens that now this fractional CFO, I have heard this more and more and more. And even like fractional CMOs,
Yep.
same thing is that it make sense from a cash flow perspective to bring someone on full time. And I love that you kind of gave the guardrails there of okay, now it might be time that you need to build out an entire financial team for the business.
Yep, absolutely.
So, I have absolutely loved this conversation because I think it's one of those things. Number one, I used to hate numbers. I will be first to admit I used to hate numbers. In school, I'd be like, oh, I can't do math. Like, what business degree that I get where math is not a priority? I was always like that. And so I always just get so just amazed and just really interested when you hear people that, and I can hear this in you, Lauren, that look at numbers differently because numbers just give you information to make decisions and asking the right questions. I think you heard Lauren say this a lot on the show, everyone tuning in, is that it's a lot of like reflection questions, not only personally, but even in your business financially. So I just love everything that you were able to share with us today. And I know that there is so much more, but where is the best place for everyone to connect with you?
Yeah, so a couple places. I would say LinkedIn is great because there's an option to book time with me. Because I would say if anything resonated today and you're wondering, like, should I be in the market for a fractional CFO or I even need a bookkeeper? I'm always happy to reference people out that I have in my network. Whether or not you would be a client of mine or I can reference you to a really great financial resource to help you in your business, I'd encourage you to book 15 minutes on my calendar.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, we will definitely link you as far as your website. And I believe you're on Instagram too. We'll have you Instagram as well as LinkedIn. We'll have all of those links right there for you. And then you also had a tool that we are going to link in the show notes. Could you tell us a little bit about the tool?
Yeah, so I know I talk cash flows a lot, and I think I encourage people who are probably at the lower end that maybe can't afford the professional services ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
You should be managing your cash flows at least on your own. And I have a free template for the cash flow. You build it out, you put in, and you can use like your prior month actuals and say, okay, even if you pulled up your bank statement, let's say you didn't have your books in order, right? As a starting point to start to look at it and say, okay, what's happening with my cash balance? I also have a free training available on my website to walk you through, hey, go to this cell and input this information because I realize not everyone is, savvy with spreadsheets, but you'll see it does not have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be some crazy tool that you're investing in. I would say keep it simple. Keep it simple and use a tool that you actually are going to be accountable with and that you're going to look at your numbers with.
Yeah. And listen, and on the flip side, just own it. If you're not, that's okay too. Seek help though. That's what I'm hoping is like, whether it's Lauren or not, this isn't just like sell Lauren, but like whether it is or not, seek help. It's okay that you're not the expert in numbers. I'm not the expert in numbers. We have experts for that. I am going to go lean on them and trust them. And I just love hearing this conversation. And I think the more that we have it, the more people that we can help and reach new levels in their business because they understand their numbers. They don't have to do it, but they need to understand them. So
Yeah, absolutely. Just understanding even the basics, right? And even if you do a quick Google search and find a video on YouTube of someone explaining what the difference between gross profit and net profit is, that's okay, right? Like spend a few minutes, try and get versed in some of the basics. So you can get your arms around kind of where you are because there's so much opportunity. Like as you were talking through, like getting into your numbers, it's not just about bearing bad news. It's about the ability to improve those and see so much more in terms of the results of your business and being able to invest more in people and your business and your family, all the things. I get so excited because it's like there's so much opportunity if you haven't been looking at your numbers to reflect on them and be able to see stuff on a go forward.
I just love that you shared that. I was going to totally just acknowledge you for that you're so forward thinking. And that's the thing is like, I know we're like, oh, numbers. But like, I was just thinking, I was like, oh, in that free sheet, I was like, you could plug in, what if? What if we hit this number? What does that mean for my business? And be able to set like realistic goals. And you already know the result of what you could do when you get it. And so I love that you share that. And Lauren, I just have to acknowledge you for the fact that, you're incredible. What you've been able to take your experience, go through something that I can only imagine, and then come out and just be such a beacon of light. It's truly amazing to hear your story. And I just gotta say thank you for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, make sure that you go out there. I'm going to leave you again with the quote. The difference between faith and hope is action. And the thing is have the faith, take the action, and you will achieve everything that you want. So thanks so much. Don't forget to share this out, tag us in, and we will give you all the love. And until next time.